You're watching Co-op for Two. I'm Jesse. I'm here with Greg.
Thanks for having me on your channel.
This is your quick before you buy it for Alien Fate of the Nostromo. But before we get started, let's go down to the board and get a brief overview of the game.
You're going to start by picking one of the characters supplied. That will show you the items you can carry. So you can carry items in these slots here. And in this slot, you can carry only coolant, which will come into play in certain actions. It will tell you how many actions you have and a special ability. As you play the game, you'll be moving around. That's an action to move. You can also pick up scrap. Scrap is useful when you can use the supplied little sheet here to see you can build these various items, which can be used for game effects or to help you to take less damage, or morale as they call it in this game, when the alien encounters you. You'll also have to be careful because there are these hidden encounters laying around the board, which some of them are safe. Some of them will have Jonesy to hiss at you when you'll lose morale, and then there are also some that will have the alien. If you encounter one of those, the alien will jump right to that space and attack you for that amount of damage. Other actions, you can craft these items, as I said. You can give them to other players, drop them in your space, pick up scrap. You will lose the game if your morale ever goes to 0, to crew lost. You will lose instantly. You're going to have to, in order to win, you're going to have to complete 2 plus or however many players you have plus 1. In this case, we're playing a 2-player game, so we have 3. They'll be different for each game. They'll be based upon things that happened in the film. So when you complete those 3, you will reveal a final mission. I'm going to leave those hidden for now, so you'll be slightly, hopefully, surprised by them. And in each of the final missions, you'll have to do a specific set of parameters to then finally win. Some of them will include this self-destruct, which adds that second way to lose the game and adds a little tension. After your turn, you move around, you'll reveal one of these encounter cards. So for instance, this will move the alien. You'll move him 1 space, as indicated here, towards the closest player, and you'll also then do this much damage to that player if they're in your space. If that does happen and you lose your morale, then your character will have to move 3 spaces away. If you encounter another concealed token, you might actually keep a domino effect may occur. Then you're going to put out scrap wherever it says equipment storage, so you'll put out scrap and then another hidden encounter in that space there. And then play will continue until either the players have won the game or you go down to 0. Essentially, it's a pick up and deliver game, and you're playing this sort of cat and mouse, trying to stay away from the alien so that you don't take enough damage before you can complete your objectives, complete the final mission, and hopefully win the game. For added challenge, you can include Ash, who's going to be moving around the ship, and if he encounters scrap, he will remove it, thus making the game harder for you. If he encounters you, he will do a point of morale damage, which makes the game harder for you. Or you will have to give up a scrap. So that's for a little added difficulty. So Ravensburger and Prospero Hall and similar style games have been coming out with these games that are pretty inexpensive, in the $30 to $40 range, that are very well produced for that amount of money. The components are very good. There's a lot of things that make the gameplay streamlined and that were well thought out, and some unnecessary components that just enhance your enjoyment of the game. The artwork looks great. There are a few issues here and there, but overall, a very good production, I think, especially for that money. One thing to note also is that the theme is actually pretty strong through the game. It really feels like you're playing Alien from when it comes down to the objectives, the final missions that you're doing. Those are all things that happen within the movie, so if you're a fan of that movie, it really comes through.
Well, so let me jump in and say, there is what's going to be a fatal flaw for many players in this game, though, and that is the lack of tension. For a game that's supposed to be about an alien that's going to rip you to shreds, this game has a noticeable lack of tension. For me, that's a deal killer. There's no clock, which is typically used in these cooperative games to ramp up the tension and the pace, but it's a fairly flat pace, and although there are puzzles to figure out, there's very little compelling feeling of trying to get this done quickly, which means you could play this and be very careful and just have a boring game, and that might be the smartest way to play it.
Yeah, I found this style of game seems to be geared towards a more mass market crowd, from the price, from the franchise, target exclusivity for a while, that sort of thing. And so the game does feel like it's aimed towards that kind of a crowd, less of a gamer crowd. These games tend, for me, to be quite easy, but I did find it to be enjoyable. There's some enjoyable things to do, where you're avoiding the alien, making decisions. There are some meaningful decisions to be made, and I found, like, for the game length, that it was enjoyable.
It is a quick game. It's fairly
Yeah,
quick, by
yes.
half hour maybe for 2 players.
Maybe more like an hour, yeah.
Oh,
I
really?
think.
That long?
Yeah.
The highlight for me are these final missions, which are quite varied. Right, there's 5 of them.
Maybe
And-
don't give them away exactly.
Okay, but you'll play one of them on each game that gets revealed at the sort of end stage of the game, and that's quite fun. They're thematically story related, and they make you play differently depending on the final mission.
Yeah, I think for me, like, this is just jumping ahead of my final thoughts a little bit. To me, like, Jesse and I actually enjoy consumable games where you kind of play them and then you're like, okay, that's enough. And for me, like, the replayability isn't here so well, but I do like the idea of playing one of these final missions and then removing it, going from one of these randomly, playing one of these, and then so on and so forth until you played them all. And then you probably don't need to revisit this game.
Yeah. Let me give my quick final thoughts. I don't think this is for real gamers, both because there's no real tension and interest, no stories, no memorable events, so it feels very flat. But also, surprisingly, there's no adjusting difficulty up beyond what's basically an easy game. So I think it'd be very hard to recommend to serious gamers. I will say, though, that you could give this to people who weren't cooperative game players. This would be a good first cooperative game for someone who likes the franchise, likes Aliens. It works. It mechanically does work as a cooperative game. And maybe for people who don't have much experience and aren't playing at a high skill level, the difficulty might not be a problem.
Yeah, I think just in general, it's a nice production. It really does make you think of the movie. Those are all kind of pluses in my book. It's a little easy. I do think that, like, it's a good game to burn through those, watch the movie, relive it a little bit, and that's exciting. I think gamers could enjoy this, but I think it's got a limited life to it. I think on paper, the game really works quite well, and there's some very clever mechanisms in there and some clever ideas and some fresh and original ideas too. But ultimately, it just kind of lacks that spark that makes it interesting. And I think maybe Jesse's right that it is missing that clock that provides that tension. I do think that you could, this is great for some non-gamers, and I think that gamers can enjoy it as well. I just think it's a little more consumable, doesn't have a great shelf life. If that's worth whatever the $30 it costs or whatever, I kind of think maybe it is, but it might be a pass for you if you're on more of a budget or your group isn't quite right for that.
And you were mentioning in our longer review that another game to check out if you like this kind of thing, but maybe with some of those things fixed, is Horrified. Might be a good choice.
It's got a lot of similarities to Horrified, so if you don't like that, maybe this is something to pass, or maybe this is something to try. I don't know. It's something to consider. You can see a very long discussion, as we usually do a big deep dive into these games, as well as these quick reviews as well. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that, sometimes it's great to hear those even after you play the game for something to listen to in the car on the way to work or something.
Good point.
Or we may have a playthrough up of this as well at some point as well, so you can check that out.
And this might be a good candidate game for someone to write some variants that might fix some of the issues we've had. I'd love to see a BGG forum posts of some variants that try to add a little more tension.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. Hope this helps you decide whether or not this is the right game for you.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.